WCW Main Event, released in 1994 for Game Boy courtesy of FCI and Beam Software, is probably more remembered for its advert than the actual game itself. You know, the one comic book ad of this scrawny kid standing over a comatose Sting. Ah, that Stinger, always putting over the younger talent. Almost always. I was going to make a quip about this kid growing up to be that Darby fellow, except Darby was born a year before this came out, so that doesn't really work. So I don't know. Maybe he's Seth Rollins or something. Yeah, you know what? Let's go with that. Let's go with this kid growing up to one day almost ending this man's career. But I digress. Anyway, Main Event has 9 wrestlers for you to play with, including Sting, Rick Rude, Ron Simmons, Big Van Vader, Dustin Rhodes, Johnny B. Bad, Rick and Scott Steiner, and a stunning fellow by the name of Steve Austin making his only video game appearance until Warzone became a thing 4 years later. Not a bad roster for the most part. Could have used more flair. Yeah, I should have guessed, right? You only have 2 modes of play, single or elimination, the former being a single match you play, and the latter being the typical beat everyone to win the title, of which you could choose from 3, professional, continental, or world title. Now only one of those titles is an actual WCW championship, but whatever, we'll let it slide. The only other option is time limit or falls, the latter letting you choose how many falls it takes to win a match, while the former basically turns the match into an Iron Man match, and whoever scores the most falls within the time limit wins. So Main Event, naturally, is a little bare bones in the feature set, and that somewhat extends to the gameplay, which... Okay, this is where you're going to have to bear with me, because a lot of this stuff is based on trial and error. Trying to find information on this game, particularly how to play the fucking thing, yeah, good luck. I've seen long plays that tell you nothing, and maybe that one Joe Gagney review from years back, which is probably the most informative thing I've come across regarding this game. So I'm mostly winging it, and there's a very good possibility I might be missing something here. Not that it really matters in the long run. So you have 2 meters, one being a health meter and the other I presume is some sort of stamina meter, and the idea naturally is to beat your opponent enough that you could score the winning pinfall. You get close enough to the other wrestler and you'll initiate a grapple from which you can press a button to perform some moves. You could also fight outside the ring and perform moves off the top rope, which probably isn't the smartest idea considering the airtime, but hey, the option is there if you want it. Each wrestler largely shares the same basic moveset, with the only thing distinguishing them being their special move, which can be performed by pressing the select button whenever you have a little icon under your name while both wrestlers are standing and facing each other. Once used, you'll have to wait a little while before the icon shows up again to power your special once more. So do yourself a favor and don't mash them buttons. You'll get a move in, then follow it up with an errant elbow drop that will most likely miss, and you'll be stuck doing the log roll for a long period of time, struggling to get your wrestler back to a vertical base. Other than that, there's not a whole lot to Main Event other than its roster and the promotion it's based on. The game itself is competently executed, the controls take a little getting used to, but once you do it's not too bad. It's entirely playable to a point. It is just there is what I'm saying. WCW Main Event is just there, and eventually I got bored and I moved on to something else. I wanted to do this game for a while. I've struggled to find the words to make this seem more interesting than it actually is, and I eventually gave up, and there you go. This is a game that exists, it plays well enough to be competent, and that's about all you can really say about it. The graphics in Main Event are typically bland, with the wrestler mugshots on the select screen being the only real impressive visual asset, and that's being somewhat generous. The wrestlers themselves share a similar sprite with mild differences among them that you could somewhat recognize. Sting has his face paint, Vader has his mask, Rick Steiner has his headgear, and I don't even want to touch on what they did with Ron Simmons. The only 2 wrestlers who look like practical clones are Steve Austin and Dustin Rhodes, because they were both blonde dudes at the time. I do like the bit where the loser is stretchered across the ring. That's kind of amusing and absurd at the same time. But hey, Main Event gave me something memorable, so I will gladly take it. On the flip side, however, Main Event does feature some mediocre sound. There's no music during the wrestling bits, so you're left with some Atari quality beeps and bloops that sound terribly low rent even by Atari 2600 standards, and the few music tracks in the game are only slightly better, which isn't saying much. Clearly the Game Boy can do and has done better than this. This is drab. And drab, like rap, is crap. Great little song, by the way, and I don't even care for country music. Overall, WCW Main Event on Game Boy is, meh. It's not a particularly bad game or anything, it's somewhat playable, it has its moments, but other than the fact that it's a WCW video game, which you didn't get a whole lot of until the whole Monday Nitro thing, Main Event isn't anything really special. It's just a stock wrestling game that does what it does competently enough, but doesn't hold your interest for very long and is quickly forgotten about afterwards. Oh well, at least they get better eventually.